Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Educators. I'm your host, Jerome Ellison, and today I have a special guest, educator Anabell K. Thank you, Anabell, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Joe. I'm very excited.
Anytime. Anytime. So let's get right to it. I like to start with a quick game. This game is called Start, Bench, and Cut. So it's like a team.
Okay.
It's like a team, right? So the thing that I'm going to give you three options. The thing that you choose to start is the best thing in your opinion. The thing that goes in the bench, it's like they're good, but they're not a starter. They're going to bench. And the thing that has to get cut is the worst of the three. All right. So
Well,
start.
so I saw one of these segments
You did?
and you asked some sports questions, and I was like, oh no, I don't
No,
know any sports.
it's not sports. It's not sports.
Okay, good. Because I wouldn't know who to cut. I don't know anybody.
All right. So your three options are Netflix, Hulu, or Disney Plus, and why? Which one would you start, bench, or cut?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Mm.
Okay, so I'll start with who I'll cut. Hulu Plus, because I don't really watch that many shows on Hulu Plus.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, Netflix and Disney. I'm a huge Disney girl, so okay, I can't. Okay, so we're gonna start Disney and bench
Nice.
Netflix. Yeah.
Nice. All right, so let's get right into these are like some reflective questions. So my first question is, why did you become a teacher? What got you into the field of education when you got into it?
Love it. I have been a teacher since I was 8 years old.
Wow. I like that.
I was teaching my younger sisters like ever since I can really remember. My mom got me like a chalkboard, back in the day, that's what we used. And I just like everything I learned in school, I shared it with my little sisters, and they kind of were always ahead at school because of it. So they knew how to read before like they started school. They knew how to add, how to subtract, everything. So they were always ahead in their class. And it's just something that I guess I've always loved education. I have, other interests that I followed along with education, but that's always just been like a part of who I am. I've never not been a teacher.
Wow, I love that. Started early on. It's like a gift. It's a
Yeah.
gift you had, right? And you just like started to ignite it at an early age, and then you saw good results. Like you saw your siblings start to have success. Like I can do this. I'm actually good at this. Right?
Exactly.
Cool. So now when you became a teacher, right? Teaching is such a very difficult career to choose. What was your biggest challenge so far as an educator? What was the thing you had to deal with that you felt like was your biggest challenge, and why? And how'd you deal with it?
I think there are a lot of reforms that occur in education, and oftentimes teachers are kind of given like, here's this reform, like now implement it, and not give it enough support to actually succeed. So I think one of the things that I definitely found most challenging was implementing some of these like new reforms and getting the services that my students needed to make sure that they could succeed. So that was a huge challenge, especially some of the schools where I taught where there were Title I schools, or where students maybe didn't have as much like economic resources, and the school also didn't have these resources. So for me, it was definitely a struggle. I had some students who were mandated to get speech services, and they didn't get the speech services, and like you would advocate and jump through all these hoops to try to get it, and then when they get it, it's like May, and you're kind of like, that's just not right. Like.
Yeah.
And so there's some things like that are just kind of like out of your control, and you try to like get everything you need, but in certain schools that's just very difficult. And I taught at some of those schools. I know in other schools it's not as big of a challenge, but I definitely went through it when it comes to that.
That's a great point. I do feel like you touched on two really good points that I noticed, like education reform, and there's so many initiatives that get thrown across every year, our tables as teachers. And, as a school, you have to decide on which ones you're going to implement and which ones you're not. But when you do implement them, you definitely need funding behind it and support behind it to make sure that it's done effectively. Because if not, it can almost cause more harm to the students, or teachers won't take it as serious if they don't feel like they're supported, and it will not be effective. So a lot of times we get a new initiative every year, and if it's not consistent, teachers are like, well, this is another thing that's coming across the table. I'm not even going to try my best with it because I know next year it will be another thing. And then another thing you said about like supporting kids, and as teachers, sometimes, we have our voice that we can advocate for them as much, but if we don't have the funding or we don't have that support, it's only so much we can do. And then sometimes you don't get that support until later on in the year, and it's like, I wish I would have had this beforehand. And then as teachers, you regret it. Like, man, I could have done so much more for this kid if I would have had that support or that funding earlier on.
Yes.
You know, so yeah, those are definitely two big challenges that need to be addressed.
Sure. I agree. And I think what you said is also really interesting in terms of like all these new initiatives and how it can be disheartening because you're trying to do the one that we just started and then there's this new one kind of being rolled out at the same time. I think in education, you'll find that it's one of the few fields where it's like that, where it's just so much inconsistency. And, you know, it's hard to prove the success of any one thing because there's not this like longevity to it. There's not like a controlled study, you know? And I have a science background. So for me, it's just like, you know, you think about like an experiment, if you're going to launch something new, you have your variables and you have your controls and there's no control. Like there's everything is changing. So you can't assess, was this successful? But I mean, this other thing launched, so maybe that was interfering with it. It's just.
Yep. And there's so many factors playing a role. Like you said, like you can't really identify what's the main determining factor that I need to focus on and adapt in order to get the best outcome, right? So it's like we're just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks and taking it off and throwing against the wall. And it's not a good recipe for success in any field, but especially when you're dealing with kids in schools.
Exactly. Agree. 100%.
Thank you. The next question I would ask you is, so we talked about your biggest challenges. What is your proudest moment as a teacher? What's the thing when you think about always puts a smile on your face?
I have like, it's hard to say like any one specific memory. I have just this kind of like feeling, and I don't know if you've had this in your class experience where it's kind of like an amalgamation of like all the memories of like, you'll have like maybe like a special like lunch with kids or you'll, you know, go outside and play with them during recess or whatever. I taught elementary school, so that was something that I would do. So it's kind of like, whenever I think back on my favorite moments or my most proudest moments, it's always those like moments where I got to just sit down with the kids and just be like, so tell me about your life. Tell me what's going on, or let's play tag, you know, or something. Yeah. And it's like that moment where you're just like, this is a fellow human being, and you're, you know, just kind of connecting with them on that like level and just building that. Like I always reflect very fondly on that.
I like that a lot. So that's so true, right? Because we talked about the stresses and the initiatives and all the things thrown on us. When we get to put that to the side and just be a human being for the kid and show the kid that we're human and we care about them outside of that, those are the moments when you get to know the kid as best as you could, and they get to know you, and it just is really fulfilling. Like those are the moments where you like, okay, I can actually impact this kid, and there's no pressure of a homework assignment, a grade, a lesson plan, anything. It's just human to human interaction. Which is really, really, really great. Yeah, great point. I feel like, and that leads into my next question, right? Like those are the moments that you remember forever. Those are the moments that you have with teachers. Like that student who you interacted with will probably remember you forever, and you probably remember those moments with those kids forever. So my next question is, who was your favorite teacher in your lifetime, whether from K to 12, right? What teacher had that impact on you?
I've been fortunate. I've had, I would say probably like 50 to 60% of the teachers I've had have been like really good, like just like inspiring teachers. And then some of the others were kind of like somewhere in the middle, and a few were not so great.
What's one that really stands out even to this day?
I would say my 5th grade teacher, Miss Sigmund, because she had this love for literacy that was just infectious. She introduced me to so many amazing books, and I've been an avid reader, you know, pretty much my whole life. So I just have a lot of fond memories when I think back on 5th grade, and just, she introduced me to Louis Sacker and the Wayside School kids. Like, and so I just like loved those stories. And she just like really, we had an infectious kind of way of like making you love literature.
I love that. That passion, right? That passion, that enthusiasm, that energy is infectious, right? And when kids sense that the teacher is passionate about it, they become more passionate about it, right? They open their minds up. Like, there's something about this that they're teaching. They really love it. I must do something, or I want to love it just as much. So her love for reading and literacy made you want to read books, and she sold it kind of to you, right? I had a mentor teacher who was like, you got to sell it. It's about how much you can sell it to the kids. When you show that passion and the energy you have, you're selling it to them, and they eat it up a lot more, you know?
100%. Did you have like an experience like that with some of your teachers?
I had a few. honestly, it was this one, it was fifth grade teacher as well. And that's such a big year.
That's
The
a big
interesting
deal.
thing, he loved Mr. Zuzek. He loved sports, right? And I
Okay.
love sports. He was passionate about teaching math through sports, right? Through statistics and through like I love baseball, so it's like a heavy sports math sport where
Yes,
it's
yes.
like batting average and on base percentage and winning percentage, and that made me love math. Like that made me really
Yeah.
want to love math because I can use numbers to do different things and learn more about the players and the athletes that I love,
Yeah.
and as far as their statistics. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's fantastic. I love that.
yeah,
I,
that was my thing for sure.
I love that that was like the in through line for you in terms of like bringing math. And it's like making math this realistic like experience where you just connect to like, you already care about baseball, you already care about sports. Well,
Hmm.
look, math is in there.
Perfect. And that's
Fantastic.
another thing that I noticed a lot of people say too. Is like the teacher who made the content real for me, the teacher who connected what
Yes.
they were teaching to something that I had an interest in or something that made sense to me in my own life. And
Yeah.
that made it real. It wasn't like this far out learning that I had no connection to it. They brought it into my life and showed me how it applies to my own life. And again, that's how you get the buy-in from the students.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that's the most effective way to teach because you can apply it, you know, it's not this like weird abstract thing. It's something that you can understand and connect to.
Sure, for sure. All right, thank you. Our next segment is called Each One Teach One. Um,
Okay.
so based on your experience, I would ask you if you had one advice, because now we have a new administration, a new Secretary of Education. What
And
one?
Dr. Joe Biden,
Yes,
I'm just
and Joe
like,
Biden, Kamala
she's,
Harris.
yes, like educators, people who are like know a lot about education and like care about this. Like, I'm so excited. Looking
Yes,
forward to it.
definitely, definitely. And Joe Biden's wife is actually an educator as well.
Yes,
So
yes,
she's really passionate and energized, like I said, about education. I think that's going to really bring more light to the field
I
that we
think
need,
so.
you know? So
Yeah.
what is one piece of advice you would give to someone in the administration now, whether it's the Secretary of Education or whether it's Joe Biden's wife, our First Lady, what would you give them as an advice to say something they can do, one thing they can do to help this field of education or the educational system overall?
That's a great question. One thing. I think equity is a big thing and it spans the entire nation, right? You have the racial divides, you have gender divides, you have rural and urban divides, you have students who have disabilities and students who don't, you know, like there's so much, there's already a lot of great things that are happening in education in some of the best schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where if you look at a model of the best school and you see like, you know, students are getting their needs met all across the board, you know, they're
Mm-hmm.
doing the best they can to like, you know, level the playing field and make sure that equitable instruction is being provided. I would say look at those schools.
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing successfully? And help make every school a model of that. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever a school, you know, because sometimes it's funding, sometimes it's resources, sometimes it's bringing in more materials. I think we're at a point where we have so much great information out there, and like we know it because amazing schools are doing this, and it's inspiring to see. But it's not happening across the board, right? There's schools where I've taught where that's not the case. I've taught at other schools where it is this case where it's amazing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have just asked for this and get it. Like, what
Exactly.
is this? And then
Mm-hmm.
other schools where it's the opposite. So I would say, like, think about how can we make sure that equity is being taken into consideration so that all students are truly getting what they need. So I would say, like, model schools after the most successful schools. Like, get more of that. There shouldn't be any bad schools. Parents shouldn't have to go to a different district to get their kid to be in a good school. You know, like every school should just be excellent. It should be a great school. It's not
Mm-hmm.
unattainable. There are other places around the world where you have good schools everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can do it here. I really do. So I would say just like go hard on that.
I love that. I love that. And one thing that really stood out is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right?
Yes,
There's
yes,
great things being done all across the country, all across the world. We just have to
yes,
find ways to be more supportive and more collaborative, right?
yes,
I
yes.
think it may not be the same for every neighborhood or every school community, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can find communities that serve a similar population and that are successful, as you said, and
Yes.
find out what really works with that school and what are they doing effectively, and then try to transfer that to other schools. I think we can have this community where everyone thrives and everyone improves and gets better because we're collaborating more. So I love that. I love that suggestion.
I love that you also brought out, like, it doesn't have to be like a copy paste job, right? Because it is like a community is unique, is going to have a unique set of kids, teachers, needs, and the environment is different. So you want to talk to those communities and get their input also, right? So it's not just like, one mold for everybody, but it's really just taking what works well and making it work well in that community. So I think that's a great point as well.
Okay. Perfect. All right, so this is our last segment. This one is called Choose Your Teachers Wisely, right? So this is your chance to give a shout out to anyone. It could be a teacher, it can be a friend, a colleague, a book, a movie, a TV show, something that has educated you and inspired you to be a better person. Just one person or thing. Who would you give a shout out to?
Honestly, you know her. Barbara Dubitsky.
Ooh, Barbara,
Bank Street.
the legend of Bank Street.
Yes, the legend of Bank Street. I think she just, I love the Bank Street Math Education program just in general, but for me, she really made me understand math in a way that was just very revolutionary to how I was taught it. I was taught it in more like a memorization kind of thing. She really made it come to life for me. So you had that teacher who made math come to life for you. She was that teacher for me. And like, it's just everything that I learned from her has just like been internalized. And I absolutely am so grateful that she came into my life.
Amazing. Yeah. Shout out to Barbara. Hello, Barbara, wherever you are. I hope you're enjoying yourself and having a great time. Yes, we miss you. That was a great time in Bank Street. Thank you, Anabell. Thank you for coming on the show. I think you shared so much great insight and stories and experiences. And I just want to thank you for being a great educator and contributing to the field of education. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for doing this. Teachers need more of this kind of interaction, more of this information. So I'm so grateful to you for putting this out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Stay blessed. And remember, education over everything. Bye.